Hello, everybody. I am here with Peter Danby. Peter is actually an old friend, but particularly noteworthy because Peter runs an organization, if I can call it that, Peter, maybe you can explain more, called Small Acts of Kindness. And he does work all over the world, helping to breathe life, teamworking, and leadership into communities who would be worthy of that help. Have I got that right, Peter?
Yes, yeah, that's close to it. There's a little story. I know it's one of the questions that you were going to ask, so I've prepared my little history around small acts of kindness and how it grew.
Well, let's start there. Go for it.
Shall I do that? So it starts in a very when I was in my 50s and feeling very good with life, happily married, 2 wonderful children, career, we'll talk about that later maybe, but work going very well. And I thought it's time for a midlife crisis. I should have one. And I'm thinking a convertible sports car or something. But around about the same time, my children had just finished their gap year. And part of the gap year, they went and did some volunteer work. My daughter did some work in El Salvador with street children. My son went to Laos as part of his trip and did some rugby coaching in schools and villages in Laos. And I thought, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. Actually, a little bit of travel. So there's a great selfish interest here as well, but also helping young people to be able to go and do more of that work. So that was the initial focus, focusing on my children and other gap year children. So I set out to go to Thailand initially, as that's on many backpackers' routes. So there's an interesting twist to this. You'll appreciate I have a very understanding wife. So here am I looking for my midlife crisis and going to Bangkok in Thailand, which was then, I don't know whether it still is, the sex capital of the world. But I went really with the intention of creating a network for people. I had about 3 contacts to go and visit. And I set off to Bangkok. And one of those contacts on the very last day actually was a charity called Friends International. And I went to an orphanage, did some football coaching, worked with the children, and that was for me the highlight of the trip, but also established, in a sense, was leading on to the future. The next year I went back with my son and one of his friends, and we spent 10 days working in the orphanage, in the school, in a juvenile prison. That was an interesting experience, coaching rugby, and generally taking the children for sport. So it was still very much an ad hoc arrangement. The next year, you stop me if I start going on too long here, it's a little bit of a story.
Sure.
But the next year,
carry on.
We were due to go out to Thailand again. And the HR director of Friends International was visiting Bangkok from, I think it was Phnom Penh, their headquarters, saw that we were coming and said, who are these people? How long are they out here for? Well, they're not here for the 3-month regulatory period. So, and they can't work with children anyway until they, so we had a message from Friends International saying, you're welcome to come and visit, but you won't be able to do any work. Now, at the time, I was working on a business school program in Abu Dhabi, and I met a Sri Lankan guy who I had met through one of the programs of the business school. And he was talking about his dream of going back to Sri Lanka and building a hospital. This was post-tsunami, so in those sort of days. And I was thinking, yes, Sri Lanka, that sounds nice to me, a tropical paradise, beaches, cricket. Yes, I could go and work there. So 5 of us this time, so part of my cricket team as well, we went to Sri Lanka. We worked with a wonderful charity called SOS Villages, which is a brilliant project, very well funded, and a great philosophy in terms of bringing out orphans and children. So we had our 10 days there, and it was a wonderful time, but we came away thinking, how much value did we actually add? We had a great time. They enjoyed us being there, but there was something missing. And the next year, you'll see how this has all just happened. It hasn't been planned in any great way. But when I went out we were planning on going out the next year, same team. And we had a message about 2 weeks before our trip saying, so sorry, we've double booked. We've got a school conference on at the time that you're meant to be coming. Could you delay by a week? Well, we couldn't. Flights were booked and we couldn't change them. So I started looking for another place in Sri Lanka and found an orphanage on the East Coast in the Tamil community. And not knowing too much about, a little bit about the history of Sri Lanka and the Tamil conflict, the civil war, which had just finished when we got there, 2010.
Yeah.
So we set that up, and we very quickly, we met with a minister, so a pastor from the Church of America Ceylon Mission, who was running this orphanage, a wonderful man called Father Rohan. Mm-hmm. And we established a relationship within that community, and that's been going on ever since. So since 2011, we've been going back twice each year to run our programs. So then the program started to evolve. First of all in Sri Lanka, and then in Nepal. And that's another nice little story. I won't bore you with that one at the moment. But it became more formalized. I started to bring together my two great loves, the leadership work, but also sport, and create a program called the Inspire Sport and Leadership Program. Mm. The aim of that program is, as you described, is providing a different kind of education for young children in areas of poverty or impacted by conflict. Mm. So Sri Lanka first, then Nepal. Then again, another vague connection through somebody I met on Queen's Young Leader Program, a wonderful man called Jean d'Amour, Jean of Love, Mutoni from Rwanda. He lost his entire family when he was 7 years old in the genocide. As a result of that, he set up his own charity called Acts of Gratitude. Can you imagine? That's his way of dealing with the horrors which happened there. So again, we're now running the Inspire Sport and Leadership Program in Rwanda. And most recent project has been in Greece. My daughter's working for an NGO and setting up a program for some young Afghan boys, refugees who live in a hostel just outside Thessaloniki in Greece. So it's been an evolving journey, and starting out with a vague intention of having a midlife crisis, and then growing in meaning. One of the things around the travel isn't just about enjoying the tropical paradise, but that is important. It's about connecting people and bringing people together from different cultures, which is why sport is such a fabulous vehicle. There's an expression, charity begins at home, and for me, that actually reinforces the divisions and some of the selfishness, in a sense, which I think creeps more and more into our world today.
Yes.
So that's been a little bit of the history. I'd like to say it was really well planned and thought out, starting with a deep, meaningful purpose. I think the deep, meaningful purpose has evolved as the charity is.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? So what really strikes me about that story, Peter, is not just your own approach and your motivation to get involved in communities and sort of provide some help, I suppose, is really the motivation. But tell me if I'm wrong. But the thing that really strikes me about is about finding the people that you can work with. So from an energetic perspective, people getting, on the one hand, you've got the HR director who's quite involved in rules and permissions. And on the other, you've got people, it's about timing and whether the trip can actually work and where the focus of attention is, I suppose. And then somehow something happens and you find the right outlet for those energies and off that goes. Is that a fair description? Or?
I think it's a good description. And again, I'd like to think, yes, I can tell the right person. I can spot them from. It's again, I've just been. What I set out to do is always work through a local let's call them a local agent, a local organization. So in Sri Lanka, it was the church. There's another one which we just linked up with called Foundation of Goodness, which again is a wonderful charity in Sri Lanka. In Nepal, that was initially it was a LinkedIn connection, and I went to Nepal on a trip to Sri Lanka because this guy said you must come, and that was just after the earthquake. So I made contact with this guy in January 2005, and the earthquake hit. I think it was in March, and then I dropped in on the way out in July, maybe a little bit later in that year. And one of the things that we did on that trip was to go and visit a couple of schools and talk to teachers. And one of those teachers, Dipendra, he's the driving force behind the work in Nepal. But he put me in touch with another guy who's a charity called Lakshmi Pratishthan, and there's a wonderful story behind that too. And Krishna, who's one of the directors of that foundation, he now runs Inspire leadership programs in Nepal. So it's been, again, I like to think of it being, I'm just gently being nudged and pushed in the right direction. That's partly my philosophy, but it seems to have worked. But it's the critical, for me, it's the critical element of success is that connection with somebody on site in the community who can do the work. And I suppose in answer to one of the other questions that you so kindly sent me in terms of this idea of being a leader, I was just reading some notes from way back that I kept, a journal, that I don't necessarily see myself as a leader in this kind of situation, but as a catalyst.
Right.
And I think I like that idea that I float in, do my stuff, and then disappear as NGOs tend to do. But the real legacy, the work, is actually the skills that are left behind. So people like Krishna, people like Dipendra, people like Rohan and Father Jude, another guy in Sri Lanka, they're the ones who really do the work.
Yes.
And
well, and what I'm getting is a very powerful sense of you putting yourself in service to something. It's it's not about you, and you're not trying to do something for you. Of course, although that is part of the satisfaction and the meaning in doing something, I would guess. But that it's not about you. It's about the people that you're working with and how you can transfer those skills and help those communities.
It is. I can't deny that I get a huge amount of enjoyment each time I come away from these places. The one slight difference there is Greece, I have to say, in terms of the refugee situation.
Yeah.
But when I come away from these places, I feel so uplifted, so inspired, that I think, you selfish. I can't swear on here, can I? But I get a great sense of enjoyment. But you're right. For me, well, you'll know this, the Royal Military Academy, which is where I got so much of my my development, my training. The motto is
serve to lead.
Serve to lead, and I suppose it was instilled in me from those days. And actually, as I look back on the early examples of the people who inspired me, it was all around caring for, giving to, developing other people. And there's an immense sense of fulfillment from that. It's this paradox. Yes, it's about giving, but actually I get so much out of it that I feel selfish giving so much to people.
So for our listeners, Peter, they may not have quite caught that connection there. So tell us a little bit about your life. Where did you start in life? As an adult, and what brought you to where you are now?
Oh, as an adult.
Yeah.
Well, that's making a big assumption that I'd ever grown out of childhood. I'm not sure that I ever did that. I think one day I'd like to be considered an adult. I'm not sure. So adult life began. Well, actually, do you know what? I'll start a little bit earlier than that, because my early years had a very big formative impact on me. I've been wonderfully blessed in my life. I grew up in a very remote part of the country, down in North Devon. And there was room to play. And there was a time and a place where you could explore the woods, the rivers, without worrying. There weren't the health and safety issues and concerns there are perhaps nowadays. Endless games of football on my own. The number of FA Cups I won personally. And my parents, who brought this wonderful balance of discipline. My father was a teacher, and love. My mother was just my mother. And then the teachers who I had around me in school, in sport, all in different ways inspired in me this sense of service and of consideration for other people. So, and it also gave me freedom to imagine and to dream. So in that sort of environment, you can imagine quite a lot of time spent on my own. I had to create my own games. And one of which, and again, this may link to other questions, is Robin Hood. So this was one of my early formative moments, was black and white television, and it was only there was only BBC One and ITV, but Robin Hood, Richard Green was Robin Hood. I can still hear the music in my mind. But there was something about Robin Hood as the outlaw, as the rebel, that certainly had an impact on me. But then this idea of stealing from the rich, I'm not sure I should call it stealing, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. And again, so for me, Robin Hood was my early hero, and I think he's probably continued to influence my thinking and my actions since then. So moving on a bit in terms of the early years for me in adulthood, as let's say, I gave up on a very promising administrative career in George Wimpey and Co. And I started out there simply because I recognized I needed a job after university. I didn't actually set out with any idea of having a career. I just wanted, and I can remember the conversation we had in the Shakespeare pub in Southampton in the final year of university. I'm talking about where are we going to go, what are we going to do? And for me, the important thing was to have a rich experience. The important thing was to enjoy the career, the life that I was going to have. And I can remember the moment in this administrative job, sitting in an office in Aylesford in Kent, and reading through a computer printout of the accounts, because these are the early days of computers. And my job was to check that the computer was actually doing what it was meant to be doing. And I was looking at this computer printout. I looked at my boss. I won't mention his name, but he was quite a grey accountant. And I was looking at my future over there, and I was looking at this computer printout of what I had to do now. Outside, it was a November day, but it was a beautiful blue sky. And I'm thinking, there's got to be something else here. And I hadn't really thought of the army as a career at all up to that stage, but I must have seen a brochure, I must have seen an advert saying words like challenge, excitement, travel, responsibility. I didn't like that so much, but it sounded like this is something I could do. And of course, the sporting life and the adventurous training and all these sort of things. Yeah. So there was quite a lot of thinking to be done about this, because this was something completely different. But I joined the army. The first 4 days at Sandhurst, worst 4 days of my life. I mean, I felt totally, what have I done here? And I think what it was that I was a free spirit. I like to think of myself as a free spirit, and here I wasn't a free spirit. From having to stand to attention and bullying shoes, I couldn't get that. And sorry, very quickly, a little story here. I was then going out with my wife, my girlfriend, and we had after 4 weeks, we had a weekend off, and I went out and we went to a lake and we were sunbathing, and I'd taken my shoes with me because I still couldn't get the bulling right. And I left them in the sun. And you know what happens, of course, it melted. I was nearly in tears because of this damn shoe. So these were some of the worst days of my life. But having got through that, the training, which I didn't appreciate at the time, but the training that I got in leadership, in thinking in the right way, in dealing with people, dealing with soldiers, dealing with different situations, was quite the best training I could have had for what I'm doing now and for living in the world.
But you were quite successful in the army, Peter. Again, your humility is showing through, because you became a commando and specialized. So what happened there? How did you go from this free spirit who couldn't pull his shoes into being one of the army's elite soldiers, with significant responsibility? That's a journey you've missed out there for me.
But it's again, one of the things I found about the military. Yes, it's very hierarchical, it's very structured, it's very disciplined, but actually what that all does is create this empowered organization. And I was told it. So one of the examples in my commando regiment, the colonel of that regiment, who again, there's so many stories I could tell about this.
Yeah.
But he would come up to me at a dinner. I said, "It's very quiet, Peter. You all right? It's very quiet. Come on, make something happen." And it was a little example of how we were encouraged to take the initiative, to do something different, to challenge the way things were. It sounds very strange in a military environment, but I had a lot of opportunities. I was given a lot of opportunities to do that. So for me, it was, I guess, one of the things, again, sport. So I was a good rugby player, good cricket player. And that immediately, whether it's at school, whether it's in different world, brings you a certain, keeps you fit for one thing, which again is very important in the military, but it gives you a certain kudos, a certain credibility. And did I plan it? No, there are a number of examples of these things just happening by chance, and me being in the right place at the right time, being pushed by the right people as well. That colonel at the commando regiment, it wasn't easy qualifying. It wasn't easy getting through that program. I was in hospital with septicemia for 7 days, and was probably closer than I knew to not getting through that at all. On my return, I came back too quickly. I got heat exhaustion, and in the process damaged a knee quite badly. So I was injured. And when I was lying in my bed in the hospital, the colonel came to see me, and I was thinking, where do I suppose I could go back to my old unit. Where do I go next? He came to see me and checked that I was all right, and said, "I want you in this regiment, Peter. So take as long as you need, but I want you in this." Again, I won't use the language that was used at the time, and just that little moment, taking the time to come and see me, "I want you in the regiment." That pushed me as hard as anything. So
interesting, isn't it? Because if that had been done in a different style, in a different way, I mean, I can because I've been in that environment, I can understand that. But for some of our listeners, somebody big and important coming up and standing over your bed and swearing at you and telling you, "You must be in this regiment," that could be quite intimidating and might send you the other way. So what was it about that example that you felt you could respond to by taking part even more?
Yeah, so maybe I told the story in a slightly in the wrong way. It wasn't shouting. He was just telling me I was important to him.
Right.
He
Okay.
wanted me in the regiment, and not just because I was a good. And the regiment did have a good rugby team, but it wasn't just that. He said, "I want you in my regiment,"
Right.
and it was a me feeling valued, feeling wanted. That's what made the difference.
It's very important, isn't it? I mean, through these interviews, what we're understanding is that there are moments, there seem to be moments in an authentic leader's life where somebody who is also authentic has demonstrated a high level of faith and trust in you. And that enables, unlocks something perhaps in self-belief or confidence or ability to operate from one's own purpose and one's own sense of self. It's fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. And they are little moments.
They
They
are.
are little moments.
Yes.
There was another guy. So after the commando training, I went to another regiment. There were too many stories, but then to staff college, and just a little thing. Our divisional colonel, so full colonel, in charge of 60 of us, then majors and from around the world. And first time I met him, I was walking down a corridor in the staff college, and he was in a civilian clothes, and I was in the uniform. And anyway, he walked past me and said, Peter, welcome to staff college. Now, of course, I who the hell are you? It could have been a cleaner. It wasn't a cleaner, but it was. Thank you, sir. Good to be here. Now, Colonel Kim Ross, his name was. When we got together then for the first time in this theatre, if you like, he then got each of the foreign students. So let's see who we got. Rajiv from India. Rajiv, stand up. Welcome to Rajiv from India. And then Thorsten from North, stand up. And he just knew everybody's name. Now, okay, he'd looked at the photographs, but he'd taken the time to remember our names, so that the first time that he met me, he could say, Peter, welcome to Staff College. Mm-hmm. And you won't be surprised to know he was just a wonderful, caring colonel. Doesn't quite fit the military model, does it? But actually, we loved him. And all of the great leaders in my military experience, we love them. We love them. And there was one guy, Peter, my very first boss, when he left our unit, then I was in tears. I know that all these hard-assed sergeants, and there were tears all over the floor. Damn it! But it was little moments.
Yeah, no, totally. Did your military experience lead you therefore further into authenticity, or not?
I think it'd be interesting to hear what the definition of authenticity. So for me, authentic comes from the word auth, the originator, the creator. And for me, I see it as being in touch with, and is that origin the author in here, your higher self, or is it actually something even greater? And my sense is that actually authentic leader, you're in touch with something deep within you, your higher self, but through that to something even higher. And so for me, it's not just partly it's being your whole self, it's acknowledging your whole self, but it's drawing out that which is the great, the auth within you. And I think the army did that in a way. There was a great, for me, in the military, in true sport, there is this noble tradition, the law of chivalry, the sporting ethos, the code, which is about doing the right thing, regardless of where you are, what you're doing, you do the right thing. And I think, again, I was lucky. I had great teachers all the way through who literally drilled that into me. And then I think the military gave that. I think part of it came from my my own studies, my mystical quest, if you like, the spiritual dimension that I've worked on, I think that's been a big part of the influence on me and the way that I try to be with other people.
So, Peter, you can't just drop that in and me not ask you the mystical quest. What is that, if you would be so kind as to share that with us? And how does that help you?
Yeah, that's a good, gosh, I shouldn't mention it, shall I? It's going to take too long. How long have we got for this? I think it actually, it started, the true quest started when I left the army, but I've got to go back a little bit further, because my grandmother was what was then called a faith healer, and she could see the aura, she could heal through the aura. She was also a medium, so the whole world of spirit, of the psychic domain, I grew up with that. And she'd said to me at some stage, you could do this. And I nodded and agreed. And then went to university, then went to the army and discovered alcohol and women and all those sort of things. And the spiritual dimension slipped a little bit in terms of its priority. But when I left, and there was no specific reason for it, but I wanted to find out, can I heal? So when I left the army, I went through an apprenticeship, a healing apprenticeship, and qualified as what had become, moving away from a faith healer, it then became a spiritual healer, and it's now an energy healer, or just a healer. So I became a healer. I studied Reiki, which is another form of healing. But at exactly the same time, I met somebody through that apprenticeship who introduced me to a mystical school, White Lodge. And again, the mystical path is this idea of, we have a spiritual impulse, all of us, and we express it in different ways. And that may be through a religion, it may be through our own particular practice or our work. The mystic is searching and exploring, finding their own way, their own path of expressing that impulse, and their own way of reconnecting with the Orth, this higher God, universal consciousness. So I studied at the White Lodge for 10 years, about 10 years. And at the end of those 10 years, I then went on a 2-year spiritual development and facilitation program at University of Surrey. It was a sort of postgraduate program.
Wow.
And I think that dimension for me has enhanced, if you like, this sense of service, the sense of the work that I'm doing, and given me a confidence to do it, but also it's challenged me to be more of, I guess, what you might call the authentic. No, that's the wrong word. To master some of the nastier bits, the animal instinctive bits. I don't think they'll ever go away, but actually reinforcing my desire to master those and actually to become something better, more evolved in a sense. So that's been my mystical, and it's still, of course, it still goes on. I think the one thing you find when you're dealing with leadership, when you're dealing with mysticism, is that it's you don't reach that destination. It's an ongoing journey. My sense is, when you think you've reached a destination, you probably actually, that's when the humility bit and
it's just base camp.
It's just base camp. Yeah.
But the other dimension, Peter, which forgive me for mentioning it, I mean, all of that I think is critical to one's sense of self, or Orth, as you frame it. But attracts me about how you've then manifested that is that you've grounded it in reality. So you're not an ascetic up a mountain. You are someone who has taken that, and then you're working with communities across the world in order to build better people for the future. You know, and that's a very practical application of that auth or spirit or whatever it is that that you're working from there.
Yeah, I'm a romantic, Mark. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a romantic, a dreamer, poet, a sort of amateur, but poet. But I think, again, interesting, one of the things which came out of that spiritual development facilitation program was linking to personality and personality profiling, MBTI, which you'll be familiar with, the Myers-Briggs profile, that actually we can get clues as to how we might express our impulse in a way which suits us through that kind of profiling. And I am a romantic and a dreamer, but my way, according to this particular model of achieving more spiritual fulfillment, is through work, is through the practical doing things.
Right.
So for me, it was important. It's always been important, not just to sit and dream. I love doing that, by the way, but is actually to go out and do things. And I think in the world today, with the media that we have, we mentioned journalists, didn't we? With the media that we have, there are so many people who are prepared to give opinions and ideas and their thoughts and their expertise. But actually what we need is people who will go out and do things. One of the charity that you know this that I'm supporting at the moment, this Help Refugees, the Choose Love people. Yep. Those were 3 women who, when Calais and the jungle was very much in the news, got together and said, right, we're going to take a van load of stuff out there. We're going to do something. They finished up with something like £50,000 in a week. They got 7,000 items of clothing and equipment coming in each day. And that has now grown into a charity which now works across Europe and supports refugees in different centers. So for me, it's a wonderful example of what you're saying. It's not just, it's terrible, isn't it? Isn't it? And really the government should be doing more about this. No, they got off their backside and they went and drove the van to Calais, but more than that, they created this incredible organization.
So, I mean, that speaks to something which is very close to our heart, and part of the reason for this research, actually, which is too often people in that position end up treating the symptoms. So they've in a really profound and worthy way, you know, if I can use that. I know worthy is not a current word, but it is admirable to go get in a van, go and raise 50 grand, get some clothing, help some people. Ultimately, that's still only treating the symptom because all the conditions still exist. So what's the role of leadership in the world today? What's the battleground in your view?
Role of the leader today, Mark, is to create more wealth, more shareholder value. And I think it's important we establish a clear agenda which will ensure that we regain power at the next election. That's pretty much the way I see the role of the leader. So is that enough?
Perfect illustration. Yes.
I think you hit on something, and it links very closely. One of the things around small acts of kindness and this Inspire program is, again, part of this evolving philosophy for me is that if we are to change the world, if we are to break the cycle of violence, and which has been through, it's not just now, it's through history, is we have to change the way that we educate our children. And until we educate them, not in maths and science, I know that's important, but actually in understanding this and our nature and how easy it is for us to be programmed to hate, to make judgments about based on color or gender or anybody outside of our own tribe, our own family, our own community. So for me, that is the most important role of leadership in our world right now, is how do we go about changing the education of our children. But of course, then there's how do we change the attitude of parents? How do we change the curriculum? So I'm not under any illusions as to the scale of the challenge. But if we are to move into a different world, if we are to evolve out of our, what did Michael Caulfield, the guy that I worked with for the Sporting Edge, talked about? Animals made good. That's us. Animals made good. And if we're to move beyond that into something greater, then for me, that is the great role of leadership in our world.
Mm. And is that why you focus on children and education in Small Acts of Kindness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And through that, and hopefully through that, again, one of the things I found is the incredible fulfillment from developing in each of the places, developing a cadre of coaches and facilitators. Mm. So Sri Lanka is a lovely example. Sri Lanka, the young university students, some of the younger members of the church, they form their own group called Lead to Lead. And they're initiating their own projects amongst the children in the rural communities, but all to do with teaching them leadership, life skills. The education system there is pretty dire anyway for these people. So they're not getting a great academic education. But what they're looking to do is to give them an education which will enable them then to thrive in whatever employment they end up with. Same thing happening in Nepal. Krishna and the team that is now out there and working together.
And I suppose one hopes that through that process, that the inspiration provided and the small words, the small experiences, those moments you talked about earlier, are kind of passed on. They're passed forward in a way to those people who remember the inspiring guy who used to play football with them, who came and talked to them about being all you can be.
Yeah, what was his name? That guy.
Ever the humility, Peter. Ever the humility.
Well, it's. You're right. It's. That is for me, and again, it boosts my ego. Let's be clear.
We all have one. I'm not saying it for those reasons, but
I had one of the young girls in Nepal. I'm hoping she's, again, because of the lockdown, some things around universities and things have slowed down. She wrote me a beautiful letter about the impact of the work and as you just said, the inspiring bit about more than just leadership, about who we are and why we're here and all these things. I'll give an example of how inspiring that is for me. Is she's one of the things we do on those programs is invite the girls to set up community projects and go out and do work in the community. It's 15-year-old. Her work with one other was to go and visit parents and persuade them, influence them, tell them the importance, the value of sending their children to school. Because in Nepal, you don't have to do that. Quite often, they will move their children into domestic service so that they can get money. Oh no, that's another story. Sorry, I tell you. So again, she did that off her own bat. She goes and visits these other parents and is telling them the value of sending their girls to school. One of the things again we're looking to do in Small Acts of Kindness, especially with the travel as it is, and it may lead to change, is look more to sponsoring individuals like that who are going to have such an impact in the world. She has to be a minister of something within Nepal. That's my dream. She's such a star. So for me, getting little snippets from her, from people in Sri Lanka, talking about the impact that the work has had and it's had on them. That's very special.
And that must be incredibly meaningful as well. It's like the way that it's been paid forward is through those people finding their own inspiration and taking their own lives forward in different ways, perhaps, than they would have been or unfolded previously, I guess.
I can't remember the exact quote, and I won't remember who said it, but on my website, there's a little quote at the bottom of the page saying, "There is no such thing as a small act of kindness. Mm. Each act is like a ripple on a pond." And for me, that's when I come away from those places and think, what value am I adding? Is it worth the money? What effect do I have here? Is it good? Is it not good? And it just needs one person who may have been inspired, may have been moved to take a slightly different path, which will then have an impact on their family, the school that they become a teacher in, whatever it might be. That's what gets me going.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's really important. You know, the people who may be reading this or watching this, some of them will feel overwhelmed. They will feel like they can't make an impact, that they are the victim of a system that they can't influence, that their boss is on their back constantly every day. You know, that there will be a whole barrel of reasons why they can't live out their own life purpose. What would you say to those people?
I just need to get something very quickly.
Go for it.
All right. This is strange, isn't it? These little moments, I can feel little tears starting to come into my mind. This is my grandmother, and then this is something she gave me. It's a first of all, it's the hands in prayer, the healing hands. But then God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Mm. And I think there's something about holding that balance of looking around the world and even in our own country, let alone the rest of the world, and feeling that sense of helplessness. And actually just, what is it? The serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And one of the things I do is write poetry to help me get through moments of those helplessness. Mm. And I wrote one which was around, will it ever change, my friend? No, it will never change. The world will always be full of this and that. And the one thing that you can do is you focus on the orth, the light. I belong to one of the nice things coming out of that University of Surrey program. Was a group of 6 of us who've stayed together since 2004. And it's, the way I described it is, it's a little light center. It's a place where we can go and nourish that light. We don't need to, we can share our thoughts and feelings, but actually it's just a place to nourish that center of light. And what I found is, actually I've stopped reading the news. There's a wonderful book that I came across in a bookstore that I was browsing called Stop Reading the News. And it described over a whole book exactly what I feel about the negativity, the weight that the news brings to you, the sense of helplessness, if you like. Yeah. So stop reading the news and focus on the things that you can change, having the courage to change the little area around you that you can work on. And for me, the mystical bit has helped there, because my own philosophy, which I've developed around why are we here and our purpose in life. And there's 2 things for me. One is to serve the higher cause. For me, that is around you're bringing your, what have you described it? Something of light, a beacon of light into the world, whatever it might be.
I can't remember.
The second thing is to work on me,
Yeah.
on my evolution as a soul, which is all part of the whole. Again, my philosophy coming out here, and I think in those dark moments is actually stopping. Get over it, Peter. You're not here to change the world. You're not. Even Jesus had a bit of a problem trying to change the world, and so I think there's something about acknowledging our smallness, but then working on developing that which we can, the light within, the authentic bit.
Yes. That feels like a perfect place to end the interview, and to thank you very much, Peter, for your time, for your insight, for your, once again, your generosity in sharing those stories with us, and your views on life and how you've managed to be successful or not be successful. It seems to me that it doesn't really matter as long as the trajectory is the one that you need to be on.
There've been some non-successes as well, so yeah, I didn't tell you about those, did I?
For another time. For another time.
So thank you very much, Mark. It's great work that you're doing. So as I said right at the beginning, don't forget to interview yourselves on the light that you're bringing into the world.
Bless you. Thanks so much, Peter, and we'll speak soon.
Take care.